If you're having a hard time producing a good and consistent sound on the guitar, I have a few reasons as to why that could be the case. So your tone is just the quality of sound that you produce when you play the guitar. And by quality, I mean simply good or bad, subjectively speaking, and the characteristics of the sound of the guitar, of the strings. For example, it could be a warm sound or dark sound. It could be a bright sound. So I'm going to go through a few different reasons for that. And I want to start with the first one, which I think is the biggest reason why sound could be not so good, is because of the direction of travel in the fingers when we play the guitar. So when we play guitar, you want to make sure that your fingers are moving upward, not outward. So if you've gotten this sound before, it's because you're pulling the strings away from the guitar and letting them snap back like a rubber band. Instead, you want, and that's because you're only engaging these knuckles, right? These middle knuckles of the finger. And what you want to do is engage all of the knuckles, right? Make sure they're all engaged. So if I want a round sound, I want to make sure my index finger goes up like that. Now there's two things going on here. The direction is upward instead of outward. And this could lead to popping because I'm going kind of under the string. So in this case, it's upward, it's rounder sound. And the other thing that's going on here is that my fingers are relaxed. So they're very loose and light, right? So think of your fingertips as paintbrushes and like the hairs of a paintbrush rather than guitar picks. So if you think more guitar pick, you're gonna get that rigid kind of popping sound. Now you can take advantage of the rigidity of the fingers and add or remove it depending on the kind of tone that you want. So if I want a brighter sound, I could add more rigidity to it. Rounder sound, I can make them loose and light. Okay, so that's the first thing. When you practice, make sure that you're practicing, even if it's a fast movement, like you're doing this. Right. Your fingers are going upward. Right, like that. Rather than, I don't think I can even do this. Rather than like that. Does not sound pretty. So upward and loose and light. Option to add a little bit of a rigidity to improve or to change your color, your tone, right? So item number 2 is going to be the angle of your fingers to the strings. So for example, let me see if I can get a better shot in the camera. So if when I sit naturally, my fingers are going to be like this to the strings. They're not like this. They're not perpendicular, right? So natural, shoulders relaxed. Place the thumb on the 6th string, index I on 3, M on 2, A on 1. So you notice the thumb is to the outside as if my hand were hanging, right? When your hand hangs, your thumb is not to the inside of your index, it's to the outside. So when you play guitar, you want that to be the case as well. It's going to be a natural position. You might get a little bit of ulnar, sort of just a little bit of flexion here, but it's not active flexion, it's passive flexion, meaning the hand is kind of just hanging in that position. If you have active flexion, you can see how that tendon kind of sticks out right there, right? That's not good. You're just compressing that tendon and overusing it. Eventually you'll get tendonitis. So try to avoid that. Passive flexion is fine. Natural, so if I open my fingers are angled against the strings. They're not perpendicular. So if you do that, let me just show you what that sounds like. I'm going to have my thumb at around the rosette and high finger right at the rosette. So right, that's the sound I get. Fingers are loose and light. I'm going to change my position. And I'm trying to play the same volume, same lightness. Sorry. You can hear the difference already in terms of roundness or brightness. Round, bright, or brighter, okay? So feel free to play around with that. That's an option when you're producing different tones. If you want a brighter sound, you can go more toward perpendicular. If you want a rounder sound, you can go more toward just a natural position, this sort of an angle. What happens when we play at this angle is that the finger sort of slices up through the string, right? Instead of grabbing the string and kind of attacking it with a nail straight on. So there's a little bit of an angle which softens the attack a bit more. Okay, so think about that. Point number 3 is very simple. It's the horizontal position of your hand on the guitar. So if I'm well, where I was right here, this is kind of my middle ground sound, like basically between the fretboard and the bridge, somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna get kind of somewhere between a round and a bright sound. If I move closer to the fretboard, you can hear that already. It's very round, almost like a harp. Even more like a harp. If I move this way, it's very bright, almost like a banjo, right? Now, in this case, there is no good or bad, in my opinion. It's just preference. And of course, if you're playing classical music and you want to stick to the aesthetic that the composer intended, and the time, the era intended, or maybe that was customary at the time, then try to play in that zone in the guitar. But I would say for flamenco and classical and everything else, we have a whole range that we can explore here. So explore it, have fun with it, try to find different sounds in the guitar to vary your tone a little bit more, all right? So again, round, bright, and everything in between, all right? Another factor is your nail length and your nail size. So I'm going to zoom in so I can show you this. Okay, I hope you can see this okay. So this is my right hand nails. You can see that my nails, my I finger, index finger is a little bit slanted toward my middle finger. My middle finger is a little bit slanted toward my ring finger, my A finger. My A finger is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's a little more rounded in general. And then the pinky I use for flamenco for extension rascado. So I generally keep that medium length and rounded. And then my thumb, I'm gonna do that. Playing side is here. Sorry, the other side. It's angled, a little bit slanted as well, okay? What I would recommend doing is starting with a rounded shape. Don't do these angles initially if you're starting out. Just do the rounded shape so it follows the kind of the arc of your fingertip, and start there. And then you can make adjustments and angle a little bit if you want, if needed, if it feels better for you. So for me, when I plant my fingers on the guitar, if my fingers are rounded, my fingernails kind of curve in a little bit, which is really annoying. But because of that, I have to slant a bit more and cut them down, cut that tip off. Otherwise it will catch and sound pretty nasty. This could also be a preference thing for a lot of people. You just like the feeling of the slant, and you can do that. Some people slant the other way, right? So instead of the index finger slanting from the thumb to the A finger, to the M finger, it slants the other way, like this way, right? So you want to experiment with that. I want to show you what you can do, what you need to do on the guitar to figure this out. All right, so if you're figuring out your nail shape, right? We'll talk about the length in a second, but your nail shape, again, go back to this natural position. Hand is hanging, thumb is naturally to the outside of the index. Put your thumb on the 6th string, and then I on 3, M on 2, A on 1, and relax the shoulders, right? Let the thumb do what it needs to do. Just make sure it doesn't go to the inside. That's not natural. So here, and then play your I finger, right? See where your nail hits the string, and think about what the tone is. Do you like the tone? Is it round? Is it too bright? Is your nail catching? If you don't like the tone, it's too bright, you can think about changing the angle a little bit, right? Sliding a little bit to the left to get a rounder sound, or a little bit to the right to get a brighter sound. So play around with that first. If it's still catching and you don't like the sound, then figure out where the nail is hitting the string. Take a nail file and just a couple of times file exactly where it hits the string to start flattening it out, to start creating an angle, right? Not too much, right? Just a few times. Always file on the guitar. File on the guitar, and then you don't just want to do free strokes, do rest strokes. See how that feels too. Free strokes and rest strokes, okay? Because they can be the angle could be a little bit different for each, right? It shouldn't be too different, but it may be. So, and then once you file, then start to round out the sides of it, which is what I do. That's why I have kind of a combination of a rounded nail and an angled nail. Okay, so figure that out. Just have the guitar, play around with it. You're not going to figure this out in a day. If you do, then you get lucky. It took me like a month to figure this out when I first started. So play around with it and see what you come up with. So there's always a lot of trial and error in guitar. And then your nail length has a lot to do with the tone they produce. The longer the nail, generally the brighter the sound. And which leads me to the other side of the coin. If you have no nails, which is perfectly fine for classical guitar, I generally do not recommend that for flamenco, but for classical, it's perfectly fine to not have any nails. There's a whole school of classical guitar that plays with no nails, and that's great. You just get a rounder sound. It's a warmer, rounder sound. With the nails, you have the range is a little more toward brighter, right? You can produce a round sound, but this this with nails is never going to be like that without nails, right? You're always going to get a slightly brighter sound with nails. So again, longer is brighter, shorter is, longer is brighter, shorter can at least give you more control and allow it to be a little bit rounder. All right, so play around with that. I generally recommend starting with short nails and then going from there. So the way I like to do that is I'll actually hold my fingertips. I know the camera's down, but it's just easier to see this way. So I hold my fingertips at eye height. So this would be up here for me, right? And I want to make sure that the fingernail is just about 1 millimeter or 2 past the flesh, past the fingertip. So start there, see how that goes. And if you need to, you can add a little bit of length. If you don't like that, obviously you can file it down. Okay, so the last thing to think about is your dynamics or your volumes. So if let's say in the screen, if down here is was 1, so below the screen is 0, which is silence. This is 1, which is the quietest possible, and on the top of the screen is a 10, right? You want to use your 1 to 10 range when you play the guitar. If you play up here at an 11, you're going to get this. It sounds terrible, right? So if you play at a 10, I can still produce good volume, but my strings aren't popping and it sounds good. So usually on the lower side, this is a 1. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's about a 1. I don't have to worry about my tone too much. It's just going to depend on the other factors that I mentioned. But keep your volume below, at 10 or below. And just as a side note, most of us are really good at playing from 5 to 10 and not so good at playing from 1 to 5. So when you practice, kind of explore the lower side of the range. I think you'll find that you'll get a more interesting sound and much more contrast when you want to play more musically. All right. So just a quick recap. There are 5 basic reasons why your tone can sound good or bad, or dark or round. And the first one has to do with the angle of attack of the strings. Make sure to go upward, right? Use all the knuckles rather than just the middle knuckle and outward. You don't want to rubber band the strings, right? So that's 1. 2, start at a natural position where your fingers are a little bit angled, right? And then you can optionally slide them to the right, slide them to the left to produce a round or a bright sound, okay? The next number 3 is the horizontal position of your fingers on the strings, right? So rounder, brighter. All right, so play around with that. You have the whole range to play with, and I think it's way more interesting when we practice, when we use all of those different options tone-wise, rather than just playing everything in the same spot in the same way all the time. Then we have nail length. Start with a short nail. That's my personal recommendation. Others have different recommendations. Personally, I recommend starting with a short nail. Start with a round shape that mimics your fingertip, and then you can optionally create angles, right? Depending on how your hand falls and depending on how the sound is for you. In terms of nail length, start with a short nail. I would recommend that, and then start lengthening it depending on the kind of tone that you're looking for on the guitar and the control that you want to have too, right? So that's going to make a difference as well. And then finally, remember your volumes: 1 to 10 rather than 1 to 11 or 12, right? So you don't want to go past that and overdrive the guitar and get a popping sound. All right. I hope this is helpful to you, everybody. If you are getting value from this, make sure to subscribe. That does help my channel get out to more people. And also, if you want to get notified when I put out a next video, just click the notification bell and you will receive that. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.